My best friend of 15 years became obsessed with a married woman and betrayed me after I let him live in my house. She manipulated him into thinking I was evil. I need to share a situation that has been eating away at me for months. The main people involved are me, 32 female, my boyfriend Henry, 31 male, my former best friend Derek, 30 male, and a married woman named Morgan, 30 female. Let me give you some background about how all of us came together. I met Derek back in 2007 during college. We bonded over our shared love for horror movies and gaming. Over the years, he became one of my closest friends. We shared everything with each other, from relationship problems to family issues. He was the person I turned to whenever I needed advice or just someone to talk to. 3 years ago, I moved back to my hometown after living in a different city for several years. I had gone through a terrible breakup and needed a fresh start. When I returned, Derek immediately welcomed me into his friend group. This group consisted of several people from our college days and some new faces, including Morgan and her husband Mark. During this time, I was in a very toxic relationship with my ex, James. He was emotionally manipulative and constantly tried to isolate me from my friends. Morgan, who I met through the group, seemed to understand what I was going through. She shared stories about her past relationships and gave me advice about setting boundaries. Her support helped me finally gather the courage to end things with James. After taking some time to heal, I started developing feelings for Henry, who was also part of our friend group. Henry was different from anyone I had dated before. He was kind, respectful, and always made me feel valued. We started dating but decided to keep it private for a few months. We wanted to make sure our relationship was solid before telling everyone, especially since we all hung out in the same social circle. During this time when Henry and I were keeping our relationship quiet, Derek confessed his feelings for me. This caught me completely off guard. In all the years I had known him, he had never shown any romantic interest. I had to reject him since I was already dating Henry. Derek seemed to take it well at the time. He said he valued our friendship more than anything and wouldn't let his feelings change things between us. When Henry and I finally decided to go public with our relationship, Henry personally spoke with Derek about it. He wanted to be transparent and make sure there were no hard feelings. Derek appeared to be totally supportive. In fact, he was so understanding that when I mentioned struggling financially a few months later, he suggested I move in with him and Henry in Henry's house. At the time, this seemed like the perfect solution. However, things started changing once I moved in. The first red flag came from Morgan's reaction to my relationship with Henry. Despite being happily married herself, she seemed unusually upset about us dating. She started making passive-aggressive comments about how Henry deserved someone more outgoing and social. At first, Henry and I thought maybe she was just being protective of the group dynamics, but looking back, there was clearly more to it. The changes in Derek's behavior began gradually. The friend who used to text me funny memes every morning and always made time for our movie nights started becoming distant. He began spending more and more time with Morgan, even though she was married. If I tried to plan something with just him, like our usual gaming sessions, he would make excuses or simply decline. Living together became increasingly awkward. Derek would avoid common areas when I was around. If we happened to be in the kitchen at the same time, he would barely acknowledge my presence. Our conversations, which used to flow naturally for hours, became forced and uncomfortable. It felt like living with a stranger who resented my existence. The most painful part was watching how Derek's entire personality seemed to change around Morgan. He used to be someone with strong opinions and interests, but suddenly everything revolved around what Morgan liked or disliked. He started dressing differently, changed his music preferences, and even adopted her mannerisms. It was like watching someone slowly erase themselves to become someone else's shadow. Henry noticed these changes too and tried to talk to Derek about it several times. But Derek would either get defensive or completely shut down the conversation. If Henry mentioned anything about Derek's changing behavior or his unusual closeness with Morgan, Derek would accuse him of being jealous or controlling. The situation became even more complicated when I discovered through a mutual friend that Derek had been sharing private details about my life with Morgan. Things I had confided in him as a friend, my family problems, my insecurities, even personal details about my relationship with Henry, were becoming topics of discussion in their private conversations. This betrayal hit particularly hard because Derek knew how much I valued privacy, especially after my experience with my ex. I tried multiple times to address these issues with Derek. I wanted to understand what had changed and why he was acting so differently. But each attempt at conversation was met with either cold indifference or hostile deflection. The final straw came when I overheard him mocking my relationship with Henry to Morgan, suggesting that I had somehow betrayed him by choosing Henry over him, even though he had claimed to be fine with my rejection. Update 1. Things have gotten significantly worse since my last post. After gathering my courage, I finally confronted Derek about his behavior. His response left me completely shattered. Looking me straight in the eyes, he coldly said that since he no longer had feelings for me, he wasn't interested in maintaining our friendship. His words hit me like a truck. 15 years of friendship suddenly felt like a lie, making me question if he had only been my friend because he wanted something more. The situation in our shared living space has become unbearable. Derek has become completely obsessed with Morgan, spending every possible moment either with her or messaging her on Telegram. Through a friend who's part of their chat group, I learned the extent of his betrayal. Derek has been sharing everything about Henry and me with Morgan, often twisting our words and actions to paint us in a negative light. His personality transformation has been shocking to witness. The most obvious change is his sudden obsession with Taylor Swift. Now, this might sound trivial, but you have to understand, Derek was always the guy who made fun of pop music and prided himself on his alternative music taste. But because Morgan is a huge Taylor Swift fan, he has completely immersed himself in everything Taylor Swift. He's spent hundreds of dollars on merchandise, concert tickets, and fan items. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, he blasts Taylor Swift songs throughout the house, singing along at the top of his lungs. It feels less like genuine enjoyment and more like a performance for Morgan's approval. The changes go far beyond music preferences. Derek has started mirroring Morgan's opinions on everything. When she criticizes someone in the friend group, he immediately jumps in to agree, even if it's about people he's known for years. Last week, our friend Tom, who has been Derek's friend since high school, got criticized by Morgan for his career choices. Instead of defending his longtime friend, Derek joined in the criticism, calling Tom lazy and unambitious. A particularly painful incident happened recently when we had to get Henry's dog neutered because it had attacked my cat. I was already feeling terrible about the situation, knowing how much Henry loved his dog. Instead of offering support, Derek used this situation to paint me as manipulative and controlling in his conversations with Morgan. He told her I had forced Henry to neuter his dog, completely ignoring the fact that it was a necessary decision for everyone's safety. The social isolation has been crushing. Henry and I have been completely cut out of all group activities. Derek coordinates with Morgan to plan events and deliberately excludes us. What's worse is seeing photos on social media of our entire friend group hanging out together, knowing we were the only ones not invited. When confronted about this, Derek simply shrugged and said he assumed we wouldn't be interested. His political views have done a complete 180-degree turn to align with Morgan's perspectives. This is someone who used to have hours-long debates about his political beliefs, but now he just parrots whatever Morgan says. Our mutual friends are shocked by this transformation, especially those who knew him as someone with strong, independent opinions. The most bizarre change has been in his appearance. He started wearing a black choker that looks exactly like a collar whenever he's around Morgan. His entire wardrobe has shifted to match her style preferences. If Morgan mentions disliking a certain type of clothing, Derek immediately stops wearing it. He's even started using the same phrases and expressions as her. Perhaps the most pathetic part is watching him waste his days away waiting for Morgan's attention. He sits on the couch from morning till evening, phone in hand, waiting for her to message or invite him somewhere. He's started showing up late to work or calling in sick just because Morgan asked him to meet for coffee. His entire life revolves around her schedule and availability. What makes this whole situation even more uncomfortable is the fact that Morgan is married, and by all accounts, in a monogamous relationship. Her husband Mark seems completely unaware of the inappropriate nature of her relationship with Derek. Everyone in our friend group can see what's happening, but nobody wants to be the one to tell Mark. The most confusing part is how Derek occasionally tries to act like nothing has changed. Once in a while, usually when Morgan is busy with her husband, he'll approach me asking why we don't have deep conversations anymore or suggesting we watch a movie like we used to. These moments of normalcy are almost more painful than his cold behavior because they remind me of the friend I lost. It's like getting a glimpse of the old Derek before he disappears again into this Morgan-obsessed version of himself. Update 2. The situation has exploded in ways I never could have anticipated. Last week, Morgan's husband Mark showed up at our house unannounced, completely distraught. He had discovered hundreds of messages between Morgan and Derek while using Morgan's laptop to work from home. What he found was disturbing on multiple levels. The messages revealed a calculated pattern of manipulation by Morgan. For months, she had been feeding Derek elaborate lies about me and Henry. She told him that Henry had confessed to having feelings for her during a private conversation and that I was aware of it but chose to ignore it to keep my relationship intact. She convinced Derek that I was actively trying to destroy her marriage by spreading rumors about her being unfaithful. More shockingly, Morgan had been encouraging Derek's romantic feelings while maintaining her marriage. She would tell him things like, "If only I had met you before Mark and no one understands me like you do." There were messages where she hinted at leaving Mark someday, giving Derek false hope about their future together. She had him completely wrapped around her finger. Mark confronted Derek right there in our living room, showing us all the evidence. The messages revealed how Morgan would strategically text Derek late at night, complaining about her marriage problems and how Mark didn't understand her. She would then delete these conversations from her phone but keep them on her laptop, which is how Mark found them. During the confrontation, Derek tried desperately to defend Morgan. He claimed Mark was taking everything out of context and that their relationship was purely platonic. But Mark had proof, screenshots of their conversations where they planned secret meetings, shared intimate details about their lives, and discussed their special connection. There were even messages where Morgan explicitly told Derek not to tell anyone about their conversations, especially me and Henry. The most devastating revelation came when Mark shared that Morgan had a history of doing this with other men. She had a pattern of targeting guys who were either lonely or going through difficult times, making them feel special while keeping her marriage intact. She had done this to at least 3 other men in our friend group over the past few years, always maintaining her image as the supportive friend while secretly manipulating them. When Mark left, Derek completely broke down. Through his tears, he finally admitted everything. Morgan had convinced him that I never really valued our friendship and that I had only kept him around because I enjoyed having power over him. She made him believe that Henry was trying to compete with him for her attention and that pushing us away was the only way to prove his loyalty to her. Our other friends started reaching out with similar stories. Tom, who Derek had recently criticized, revealed that Morgan had played the same game with him 2 years ago. She had caused him to break up with his girlfriend at the time by feeding them both lies about each other. Another friend, Jake, shared how Morgan had manipulated him into cutting ties with his best friend using similar tactics. The hardest part to witness was Derek's reaction to all this. Even after seeing concrete evidence of Morgan's manipulation, even after hearing multiple stories from other victims, he still tried to find ways to justify her behavior. He kept saying things like, "You don't understand our connection and she must have her reasons for doing this." Update 3. After the explosive revelations about Morgan's manipulation, our living situation became completely unsustainable. Henry finally took a firm stand and asked Derek to move out of his house. At first, Derek resisted, claiming he had nowhere else to go and that we were abandoning him when he needed us most. But Henry remained firm, especially after what happened next. Despite knowing the full extent of Morgan's manipulative behavior, Derek continued to secretly meet her. We discovered this when our neighbor mentioned seeing them together at a local cafe, looking very intimate. When confronted, Derek revealed that Morgan had fed him a new story, claiming that Mark was abusive and that she needed his protection. She had manipulated him into believing that everyone who tried to separate them was actually trying to keep her trapped in an abusive marriage. The situation in our friend group deteriorated rapidly. Most people sided with Mark after learning about Morgan's history of manipulation. Sarah, another friend, came forward about how Morgan had similarly manipulated her brother last year, almost destroying his marriage. As more stories emerged, Morgan's carefully constructed image crumbled. She eventually had to leave our social circle when several other men spoke up about their experiences with her manipulation. But Derek's loyalty to Morgan never wavered. Even after she was exposed, even after her husband filed for divorce, Derek continued to defend her. He would say things like, "You don't understand what we have," or "She's just misunderstood." It was painful watching someone I had known for 15 years become so deeply brainwashed. Last month, Derek finally moved out. Through mutual friends, I learned that he rented an apartment just 2 blocks away from Morgan's new place. He genuinely believes that now that she's getting divorced, they'll finally be together. What he doesn't know is that Morgan is already seeing someone else, another married man from her workplace. Before he left, I made one final attempt to talk sense into him. I reminded him of our years of friendship, all the memories we shared, and how he had changed since meeting Morgan. I showed him the messages from other men she had manipulated, tried to make him see the pattern. But he just looked at me with blank eyes and said, "You're just jealous because Morgan and I have something real." That was the moment I realized my friend was truly gone. Henry and I are doing much better now that we have our space back. Our relationship grew stronger through all this drama, and we're planning to get married next year. We've made new friends who understand the importance of loyalty and boundaries. Sometimes I miss the Derek I used to know, but I've accepted that person probably never existed. Last week, I received a text from Derek asking if we could try to rebuild our friendship. Apparently, Morgan has completely ghosted him after getting involved with her new target. But I didn't respond. After everything that happened, after watching him choose a manipulative person over 15 years of friendship, I realized some betrayals can't be forgiven. I'm sharing this final update to close this chapter of my life. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about friendship and loyalty. It showed me that sometimes people aren't who we think they are, and that's okay. I'm moving forward with people who genuinely value friendship and understand the meaning of loyalty. For those wondering about Morgan, I heard she's already working her magic on her new target, using the same tactics. Some people never change, but at least now I know better than to let such people into my life.